Okay, so Clippers Jazz. The Jazz have had a good amount of time off. The Clippers have not. I have a bit of fear that they're going to be exhausted in game one. But anyway, I do believe in the Clippers to win this series. Apologies to Utah fans. Feel free to let me know about it if it doesn't go that way. Just be nice about it, please. So my biggest question with this series is, will the Clippers just go small again like they did against Dallas, and will they switch everything against the Jazz, and will it force Utah into more individual basketball, which is not their DNA, even if they do love the pull-up threes off of the screens? If the Clippers decide to play their big guys, Zubac and Ibaka, I don't think those two are going to be able to step up on the screens. They could surprise me, but I'm not banking on it. And that's the heart of Utah's offense, right? It's Gobert diving to the rim, help comes, and then they start kicking the ball around the perimeter, and then they've got a bunch of guys who can either make the shot or go off the dribble, keep the drive and kick game going. But if the Clippers are switching everything, then it's not as easy to do that, and then it becomes more of a one-on-one game. And the other thing, too, is Gobert is not good enough to consistently make you pay for having a smaller guy switched onto him. There are, of course, ways to counter switching defenses. There's slipping a screen, which I'm sure the Jazz will try with Gobert. There is also screening your own guy, so that way they can't do the switch because the dude can't move, and then also the defender on the ball handler has to fight around all that action. There is also just setting multiple screens and just confusing them on who has to switch where. The Spain pick and roll would be the terminology. All this said, it's not like the Clippers are just loaded from top to bottom with amazing wing defenders. They've got two of them, and they've got Batum, who's cool, Morris, who's good, and then after that it gets a little dicey. I mean, if Reggie Jackson has to play heavy minutes in a switch everything or switch most things type of defense, then Utah can definitely go at him. I think defensively your better option would be Terrence Mann, who was, of course, great in that Game 7 against Dallas, so maybe he earned some trust from Ty Lue. The other thing, too, is the defense on Donovan Mitchell. I mean, we remember how frustrating it was that it seemed like the Clippers didn't have the right game plan on Luka until, I don't know, Game 6, maybe, when it was more of Kawhi picking him up and starting to defend Luka from around half court, and then they brought more traps on him and forced him to be more of a passer. And, Mitchell's not as good as Luka, and he's definitely not as good of a passer, even if he has made improvements. So you could have more success bringing two guys on Mitchell. That said, while Dallas had a good amount of shooting and Boban was a finisher around Luka, they didn't have a lot of guys who could take it off the dribble, whereas the Jazz have a million of those guys. So the rotations and the communication need to be there for the Clippers, and they were definitely not there all the time against Dallas, but they got better as the series went along. As I say that, the Mavs had a 120 offensive rating in Game 7, but a lot of that was Luka, who again the Jazz don't have, and in a Game 6, the Clippers' defense was great. I would also like to believe that Kawhi will defend Mitchell earlier in the series than when he started defending Luka more. So yeah, again, all of that is me thinking that the Clippers are just going to be small. If they're going to be big, I just feel like it's going to be too much of a challenge, because with all the shooting the Jazz have, I mean, their weakest link as a shooter is Royce O'Neal, and, well, he's not bad. Then I think what's going to happen is you're just going to have one guy who's got to rotate over to the corner or whatever, and he's just not going to be able to get there. Now, they could try trapping with the bigs, but Gobert has gotten better at taking one or two dribbles to the rim and then finishing, which means you'd have to bring another guy to him, and then somebody's going to be open unless one of the guys from the original trap has now gotten to the new guy who's open, and that's just a lot of moving bodies. And with the shooting of the Jazz and one guy, the center, Zubac or Ibaka, who's not as fast to rotate, I just feel like that's going to be too difficult. I mean, there's always the chances of more typical pick-and-roll defense, just hedging or showing, you step up and then you get back to Gobert. But again, the Jazz have been feasting on defenses like that all season. Unless they would just switch Zubac the way they did against Luka, and they would hope that the, Conley, Clarkson, Mitchell would just miss the shot that they will inevitably take over Zubac, or if they try to get by him. And I just don't know if that's really going to be viable. But I do still like the Clippers' chances if they're going with that small lineup. And part of it, again, is because I don't think Gobert can make them pay on switches, which then gets me to the Clippers on offense and specifically Gobert on defense. So if they have Zubats out there, it allows Gobert to patrol the middle, which is, of course, not ideal. Yeah, I know you can try the Kawhi, PG, pick and rolls on Gobert and just take mid-range jumpers if he's going to drop. I understand that. Gobert's gotten better at stepping up. Now, if Zubats and maybe Ibaka prove to be able to play a decent amount of minutes in the series, then it does give them that one guy in the dunker spot, which is always nice to have. Yeah, it does allow Gobert to chill in front of the rim, but if you're able to get by the first defender, then Gobert's going to have to step up, and I think Zubats could get some dump-off passes from that. Really, to me, the question is, when they put the 5 shooters out there, where does Gobert go? I mean, if they stick him on one of the wing players, then the paint is wide open, which means they're probably going to have to run a zone, and if you run a zone, then it's 5 guys on the perimeter versus 4 guys, and we saw how many open threes the Clippers generated when they faced that against Dallas. Now, the Jazz are way better defensively than the Mavs, and I would give them more of a chance to, close out to guys and have one guy effectively defending 2 guys, like in the opposite corner of the ball or whatever. But it's still difficult, and I think the Clippers figured some more things out against the zone as the series went along. There was some plays where Kawhi was cutting. There was a couple times where PG drove and then someone would cut to the rim like at the same time as him. But even then, as they were figuring out how to go at the zone with Boban in the middle, they were still getting a lot of open threes. And I feel like the same thing could happen if the Jazz just run a zone to make sure Gobert can stay in front of the basket. The other thing with the Jazz defense is, do they have the individual defenders to slow down PG and Kawhi? I know Joe Ingles played PG to a stalemate a couple years ago, and there is always the fear of Paul George just psyching himself out in a playoff series or whatever it may be. But I just don't know if Royce O'Neal and Bogdanovich and Mitchell and Conley and Clarkson are the guys who can consistently slow down the Clippers' top 2 guys. Now, in terms of how the Jazz can throw extra attention at the Clippers on offense, double team Kawhi, PG, that sort of thing. If Zubats is in the game, I think that's definitely a possibility. Ibaka, similar thing, because then you're just daring those guys to make a play in the open court. If Rondo is in the game, you can just leave him open and dare him to make shots. And sometimes, you can usually tell pretty early if it's a good or bad shooting day for Rondo. If the Jazz are going to be double teaming with Gobert in the zone so he can stay in front of the rim if the Clippers have gone small, well, then at that point, you got Gobert there, you have 2 guys on the ball, somebody's definitely going to be open, assuming the Clippers just move a little bit. That said, if Gobert, because of the zone, is able to just be in the middle of the paint all the time, then whoever the now open guy is off of the trap, well, that guy might just be forced to take a jump shot, and yeah, you're going to get some open looks off of that, and you would prefer if it's not Kawhi or PG. But if you're just not able to get right to the basket because of Gobert, then the Jazz would probably say, yeah, at the end of all that, the math says we're going to win if they're just never getting looks at the basket. Now, if Gobert is not going to be in the zone and he's going to be defending somebody on the wing and then they go to trap, then Gobert would have to rotate and you could get open looks off of that. So that's kind of where I'm at. I feel like top to bottom, Utah is more talented than the Clippers, but the Clippers have the best player in the series, and I just think they can do very specific things that can give the Jazz problems between switching, making Gobert defend out of the paint, and they've got a size advantage on most of the Jazz perimeter guys. So I think the Clippers are going to win. The Jazz are definitely deeper. I still have questions about the Clippers passing, even if it was very impressive in Game 7 against the Mavs. Again, there is always the fear of Paul George just suddenly scoring 7 points in a Game 5 or whatever. And I'm also fearful that the Clippers are going to be exhausted for Game 1. Yeah, it's only like an hour, maybe 2-hour flight from LA to Utah, but still, you're going right from that Game 7 into a Game 1 against this Jazz team who's been sitting for a while, and I mean, maybe it's the idea of, well, they're a little rusty, the Clippers are ready to go. It could also just be the Clippers are going to be dead midway third quarter of game 1. I don't know. But yeah, I like the Clippers in probably 6 or 7. I don't want to act like this is going to be an easy series. So yeah, I think the Clippers are going to the West Finals.